Hello, folks. Welcome to Virtually Sunday, a presentation of Whatsoever You Do Incorporated. I'm Norbertine Father Tim Shilcox coming to you with reflections on the scriptures for the third Sunday of Lent. And we got options today. We got all sorts of options for communities that have catechumens and candidates for full membership in the church. The Year A readings can be used. It's the story of Exodus, and especially it's the long story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well from John's Gospel. There's a shorter form, but even the shorter form is long. And then for Cycle B, for those communities that aren't receiving new members into the church at the Easter Vigil, the possibility of Exodus, the story of the commandments being given to Moses, and the story of Jesus, among other things, clearing the temple. But I thought it would be helpful instead this week to keep it sort of simple, keep us sort of focused, looking at the second reading for Cycle B readings from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, just 3 little verses. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and an absurdity to Gentiles. But to those who are called, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Brothers and sisters, I'd encourage you to join me in just thinking about the image of the crucifix, the concept of the crucified Lord, his experience of being tried and found guilty and condemned, his experience of being tortured and treated shamefully and being walked carrying his own cross, his own instrument of execution to the skull place, Golgotha. This is the Son of God. This is how it unfolds, this perfectly innocent lamb standing in our place, being treated this way and being put to death though he had done nothing wrong, for healing, for preaching the truth, for being gentle and humble of heart, being himself the long-awaited Messiah, embracing our human condition in everything but sin. This is how he gets treated. This is how the story goes. In many ways, it is a stumbling block. In many ways, it is an absurdity. Of course, we're quick to wear crosses around our necks, perhaps, or on our jewelry. We gild them and put them on tops of steeples, the crucifix at every altar where the Mass is celebrated in Christendom. And yet it's a symbol of, in the short term, failure. It's a symbol of death. It's a symbol also of love, of a love so profound and so intense, and in many ways so far beyond our human capacity that we struggle to understand it. A love that is so focused, trusting in the Father's love, trusting in the power of love stronger than death, that allows one to give himself up, to give herself up totally, completely, in an unjust situation, unfair, undeserved. I mean, it's staggering, isn't it? Having studied art before I was in seminary, one of the things I'm aware of is that for the early Christians, the crucifix could not even be a representation, a visual piece of art in the first 5 centuries of Christendom. It was too daunting, too absurd, too foolish. It'd be like wearing a little golden electric chair around our necks, or a gilded noose around our necks as jewelry. People would be mortified. We'd be considered crackpots. It was only gradually, as the Christian community began to realize the inseparable nature of the cross and the resurrection, that artists could begin to represent, prayers could begin to conceive the reality of the crucifix. It doesn't make sense that the Savior of the world should have to suffer so much, that the Son of God should have to die in such a scandalous way, that a miscarriage of justice should be a part of the salvation of the world. And yet Jesus accepted this absurdity. And how? With a baseline of absolute trust. I know I don't deserve this. I maybe don't understand this, but I trust that the Father whom I love, who empowers me to love him and to love other persons, not only my friends, not only my family, but my enemies, that God of love is going to sustain me. No leapfrog hop over death, but that God of love is going to sustain Jesus through and beyond death, through the worst of it. And so he can enter into the storm. He can enter into the darkness. He can enter into the chaos and disintegration, however we want to describe death, because he trusts that the Father's got his back. And not just in a shoulder slapping, elbow knocking, macho kind of way. I got your back, it'll be okay. But that as real can be. Jesus died with a kind of serenity, not to mention the mercy for those who had executed him. Jesus died trusting that the Father would sustain him somehow. This is love beyond human limits. This is divine love, into which we are invited by the cross, by this foolish, absurd experience of Jesus. And let's face it, it's our experience too, isn't it? We might do it silently, we might keep it to ourselves privately, personally, or maybe it might show in an illness, in a public tragedy, in a great mistake or scandal, in some obvious pain. But we all carry a share of the cross, don't we, brothers and sisters? And when we carry it, when it falls on our shoulders, isn't it absurd? I don't deserve this. Why did this happen to me? Why did you take my loved one, God? Why did I lose my job? Why can't I stop drinking? Why can't I stop acting out in whatever the negative way is? Why do you seem so silent, God? We carry crosses. We carry crosses, big ones. It's part of the point, brothers and sisters, that Jesus, having been there under the weight of the cross, is going to be there with us if we allow him to be there. And God is going to bring, through Jesus, his companionship with us, even in our deepest pain. He's going to bring life and healing and mercy and freedom and deep, serene joy out of the cross. The cross brings us into intimate and close encounter with Jesus, that our successes, our health, our popularity, our certainty would never do. A few years ago, I was out at Clintonville serving, and a very prayerful, holy man came up to me one day. He said, "Tim, I was praying and Jesus sent me a message to give you." I'm thinking a little bit skeptical, a little bit, what's Jesus got to say? And very simply, this dear brother said to me, "Jesus says to you, you're Simon of Cyrene." The guy who helped Jesus carry the cross. The guy who begrudgingly or willingly or a mix of both was pressed into service, was put under the weight of that cross, not only digging into the Lord's shoulders but into his, was pushed up right against Jesus to feel the warmth of his body, the splash of his sweat or his blood, to hear his labored breathing, to stay close to him in his pain, to fall when he fell, to such intimacy under the weight of the cross that Simon of Cyrene never would have forgotten. If we try to explain everything in human terms and human logic and wisdom, it's going to fall short, isn't it, brothers and sisters? And in some ways, the wisdom of God is just turning everything upside down, like Bishop Dan Felton would say, standing on his head at Lourdes a few years ago. To accept Jesus is to accept death as an inevitable part of the journey to new and eternal and complete life. To accept forgiveness is to acknowledge our weakness, our sin, our total dependence that God is going to be merciful. And then to begin to make our judgments about what's really important. Not money or fame or self or pride or vanity, not what we own, but what we can give away, how we can serve, how we can help, how we can forgive others even when they don't deserve our forgiveness. We can stand with the Greeks looking for flashy signs that line up with philosophy and human expectations and logic. We can stand with the Jews who would never guess a crucified Savior would come into the picture, refusing to accept something so different than we might expect. Or we can stand with Jesus at the foot of the cross, under its weight on the journey to Calvary. We can nobly bear our own cross, let others help us. We can reach out to others when they need help, and we can be the one to provide it. And we can expect to find Jesus in the intimacy of that struggle and that weight and that suffering. Going through the Confessions of St. Augustine with our first-year seminarians, a nugget that just floored me a few weeks ago. In my deepest wound, I found you, Lord, and there you dazzled me. In our deepest sin, his forgiveness stuns us and frees us. In the moment of loss or pain, his presence keeps us going. And if we can embrace even the reality of death, the cross, or however it will come to us, our death in his death, his trust in the Father, raises us up. Standing on our heads, upside down, inside out, different way of thinking. May Lent accomplish that perspective for us, brothers and sisters. God bless you.